Okay, next I'm going to show you a cool way to go in and create a file. Now it's not going to have any contents in it, it's just a cool way to create a file. And it's called touch. So I go in here and say touch kumquat. And so now if I do an ls, I've got kumquat and temp. Cool. I'm going to do an ls minus al, and I'm going to combine the two letters together. Instead of minus a and minus l, I'm going to do them both. Okay, and you get to see that things are color coded, right? You kind of see that already. So the green with the blue means that the amount, it's, well, okay, I'm not going to get to that point yet. So kumquat's just a plain old file and has a size of 0, you can see there. Okay, so occasionally we're going to use that to be able to do some stuff. Okay, so one more time. With the ls command, there's some terms that we use. We used arguments, that's a term we use, and then we used options. Arguments are things like, in this case, the argument is going to be a file or a folder. So for example, if I did ls user bin, that means, so user bin is an argument. Okay, cool. So I could do, for example, I could do multiple arguments on the same screen. I could say ls user bin space temp. And in this case, well, it went by too fast, but I can have multiple arguments, and so the ls command just goes through one at a time, lists all the content on the first one, lists all the contents on the second one. It also puts them in alphabetical order, which is a little weird. Okay, typically the arguments are separated by spaces, not commas or anything like that. And then we have options. So in the case here, I showed you the A and the L command. So ls minus A minus L, gives me this, which is the same thing as AL, combining the two letters together. So I want to give it a directory argument, okay, which is the synonym for the current directory. There's two ways you can do that. One would be with a dot, because that always works. And then the other one would be using the tilde, right? Okay. So for example, I'm going to go back up to the root. If I said ls minus al, dang it, minus al tilde, that's going to give me the exact same content that we had before. So that is showing an example of both options and arguments. So options basically alter the behavior. That's typically what they do. And they almost always, there are a few exceptions, almost always start with a dash. Okay. So I'm going to do something weird here. I'm going to do ls minus alr. Okay, r. Whoop, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to go back to my home directory and do that. Hey, I'm going to use the history. I'm going to go up and do that. So it's the same thing, except R means put things in reverse order. Okay, now there are. This is kind of, for us in English, A meant all, L meant long, R meant reverse, and it makes perfectly good sense. But what if you're not using English? Well, there's another way you can do this. You can do an ls minus al dash dash reverse. You can actually spell out the word, which kind of sort of makes sense if you're working in a different language, because the A and the L and the R don't get translated, but the reverse does. So if you're in a different language, those things could change. So the long options. So if you do, I mentioned one of the other videos about how you can get to the manual page. So I'm going to type man space ls. By the way, there's going to be a gazillion options, so don't panic. Okay, so A for all, and then they show what the long abbreviation would be. So there's a capital A for almost all, and then one for author, and one for printing, non-printable characters, and block size, and I'm going to hit the space bar to scroll through. D for directory, and it goes on down the list. There's a gazillion of these things, but most of these have both a short version and a long version. You can always tell the long version because it has a dash dash, and probably an entire word which is worthy of being translated into a different language. Cool? All right. Okay. So, like, I'm going to hit Q to quit because that's what it says to do. Cool. So, the man command. Okay, cool. All right. So, here's an oddity that I don't particularly like. I could say ls-al user bin, right? And I could actually do this in reverse order. Now, I don't recommend you do this. I'm just showing you that it actually does work, although please don't. It's extraordinarily common that all the options get done first. And the reason I'm saying that is there is a POSIX standard that talks about this, but people who write programs and put them out there for the world, they may not follow that. They may be expecting all of the options to come up front and then all of the arguments to come up second. For example, when I wrote programs for Linux in the day, I never supported them being backwards, so don't do it that way. Don't get in the habit of doing it that way. Always put the options first. Okay, so let's talk about what all this stuff means that we're looking at. There's actually a cool little doodad here. So the stuff at the front has, R's and W's and dashes. R stands for read, W stands for write. These are permissions, the access rights. And we'll talk about in a little bit, a heck of a lot more detail, what every one of these things mean. The next one is what's called the link count. Typically, a link count is going to be 1 for a file, and directory, if a directory has 4 directories underneath it, then it's going to have a 4. Okay. And then the username and the group, we haven't talked about a group yet, the file size, the modification, and then the file name. Okay. Dang it. Okay, so let's look at the last one, the zip details. So what this basically means is, so we can read, write, and execute. That's the RWX. And then the next section is R blank X. The next section is R blank X. We have a link count of 1 because it's just a file. It's owned by root, and the group is root. It's 48,497 bytes big, and it was created on November 19th, 2018, and the name of the file is zip details. So there's an awful lot of content there, and when we get to chapter 9, we're going to spend a heck of a lot of time with what those 3 little RW things mean. But for right now, we're just kind of going to go, okay, cool, isn't that interesting? Okay, now let's talk about this color coding thing, because some of this makes sense and some of it doesn't. One more time, I'm going to do AL. So how does the machine know what the temp thing is, or what that kumquat is? Well, there's a way you can ask the machine to tell you what type of file it is by using the file command. So I'm going to say file temp. And it should come back and say, temp is a directory. Okay, cool. I'm going to say file kumquat. It says kumquat is empty, so it doesn't know if it's text file or a binary file because it's empty, so it just basically says, I don't know. But let's figure out what those blue things mean. Let's do file.cache. Ooh, it's a directory. Okay, so dark blue means a directory. So let's look at all the dark blues. I have a dot and a dot dot, which are synonyms. They're not really there, right? Dot means current. Dot dot means go up. I have a folder called .cache, one called GNU PG, and then one called temp. That's kind of hard to see the temp one because it has a green background. The light green background means it's a mount point. Okay? So it is a mount point plus it's a folder. And so I'll confess it's a little hard to see the blue part, but trust me, it's there. Okay, so the file command is actually a pretty cool way of doing things. Okay, So let's do some more ls stuff one more time. I'm going to do ls minus al on just the root. Okay, cool. Makes sense. So I'm going to do one more time. I'm going to do ls minus al user bin. And it went too fast. Doggone it, I can't. It's the file name started with X, for God's sake, so there must be one heck of a lot of stuff. So can I like use the up arrow or my mouse to go over there on the scroll bar and go by? I haven't got a scroll bar. So how the heck do you get to see what's at the top? Well, you do that thing. There's a construct we haven't really talked about. It's called piping. Okay. We'll go into a lot more detail a little bit later on when we talk about redirecting things. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do up arrow. Okay, then I'm going to use the style character, which is usually over there by the inner key. Somewhere around your inner key section. I don't know where it is. That guy. Okay, it's called the style. It's the up and down guy. And then I'm going to say less. Now, there's a history behind that. In the real version of Unix, this command was called more, which meant give me things one chunk at a time. You know, give me more, more, more. And I guess it's just humor that when the replacement one is called less. Okay. Now you've actually seen it in operation when we ran the manual command. So this is the first part, and then you have this little colon here. I'm going to hit the space bar. Space bar does me one page at a time. And it'll allow me to do like page up now and page down. So now I can scroll in pages. We're using the page up and page down. Isn't that pretty cool? Kind of sort of the same thing as like using a scroll bar, except I don't have a scroll bar. And I'm going to hit Q to exit out of that guy. So whenever you have the content go way, way too big and you can't see it all, you pipe it. Don't worry about what that means. Just, okay, pipe it through the less command. Okay. So for example, instead of just piping stuff, I can just use the less command as a way. I don't have to. Okay, let me explain. I'm going to say less, and then I'm going to look at a file. I happen to know there's a file out there called etc. password. Okay, it's the password files. Okay. And so this wasn't big enough for me to have actually less do anything for me because it all fit on the screen. Okay, but so one is I use less to take the content of an ls command and break it up into pages. In this particular case, I use the less in order to see the contents of a file. It's like reading a file. Like if this was Notepad, you know, you double click on something and you do say file open, right? That's kind of what we're talking about. Except in this particular case, it was already at the end, so I didn't actually need to do less, but nevertheless. Haha, nevertheless. Okay, so what you need to know is the space bar makes it go to page up and page down. Well, space bar makes one page at a time. You could use the page up and page down key on your keyboard. That's pretty cool. And Q to quit. Okay, so on page 19, to kind of give a guided tour of the stuff that's in the system. So I'm going to go back all the way up to the root and just take a look at this. Okay, so just to give you some hints on what all this stuff is. Okay, so bin. Bin is the location where binaries are, and in the lingo of the time, that's where your programs, your application programs are. So bin. Boot is where the files are that help the machine start up. This is your startup files, and there's an awful lot of stuff in there, but most of them are executable. Next one is called dev, and dev is for devices. Remember I mentioned that you know, when your machine got created, it has all these virtual devices. So it has, you know, a serial port, and it's got, you know, all these other things. So this is where all the devices are. Whether there's something connected to them or not is not really all that relevant just yet. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so we'll go ahead and just pause this and continue like we always do.